Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Blokes podcast. Today, myself and DeadDuck are going to be talking about resentment, the absolute epidemic of it in our culture today, and how it affects men and boys. Pull up a stump and join us. And first of all, good day to you, DeadDuck. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Yourself?
Well enough. Well enough. For whatever reason, I've been hearing both in my own life and just kind of out there, social media and so forth, a lot about resentment. And I have a long and tumultuous relationship with resentment because of my own background and my own struggles in life. I have come to discover, how dangerous it is for me. Of all the negative feelings or negative experiences I have, the one that, I always end up having to drag around with me, that, interferes with everything I try to do, um, and also with everything I try to avoid, is resentment. That is, resentment is from the Latin to relive, to re-experience things. The every echo of uh, every past experience. Things that happened to me, things I did, things that I observed, that they in the end, before I started getting better, they would just start showing up as very powerful, intrusive thoughts, intrusive memory. And that, to have any hope of getting better, and not ending up dead, I was going to have to figure some kind of a workaround to get rid of them, you know. Now, for me personally, it was a lot of work and a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of, uh, failure, before, I could honestly tell myself that, while certainly not perfect, I've got a decent handle on not being resentful, and it caused me to make sacrifices of things that I used to really hold dear, like, uh, holding a grudge, basically,
Hmm.
and being unforgiving, and along with my uh, post traumatic stress, my suicidal ideations and tendencies, of course, my severe alcoholism. It was one of the things that just about took me out of the game, And after it was over with, and it was one more thing. After, it wasn't trying to kill me anymore. I woke up and looked around and I said, wow, it's killing a lot of other people, you
Mm.
know. And in this instance, I'm saying people,
Mm.
because that one's not limited to just us guys.
Yeah.
Um, they're dying by their own hand, they're dying by the hand of others, they're you know, what in the recovery program, we call it suicide on the installment plan, where you just very slowly, do things to yourself that eventually lead to your death, but it takes years, decades, right? So people look at it and say, well, everybody dies, but the truth is, it was an unwitting suicide. It
Mm.
was, a mistaken, um, you know, self uh, elimination, just by doing things that they thought would help them cope.
Mm.
And like I say, now that I've had some time to catch my breath and open my eyes and take a step back and look around, I see it everywhere.
Mm.
I see it, in unfortunately too often in our movement. it's a core principle of you know, a lot of brands of feminism is just underpinned by resentment. You
Yeah.
know, it is just politicizing the concept of revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, of course, just like what I used to do, it's all dressed up in all different kinds of camouflage and justification and et cetera and so forth. But you know, the fact of the matter is, it's just resentment. You know, that's
Mm-hmm.
what it is. And you know, I remember feeling convinced down to my toes, you know, that my resentments were justified. And at the end of the day, you know, it's like I can still make that case. You know, I can
Mm.
still like map out for you exactly why I felt the way I felt. You
Yeah.
know, but then a person has to kind of be more pragmatic and consequentialist and
Mm-hmm.
just admit that, you know, the morality or the ethics of, you know, what how I was living my life didn't matter at all because it was killing me, you know,
Yeah.
and it was in the process it was making everybody else around me miserable, you know. And so, you know, I spend a lot of time avoiding being resentful myself, of course, but also spend a lot of time, you know, I guess, encouraging others also not to be resentful. Sometimes, right, like some situations with like the men's trauma group that I was in today, it's not really that hard, you know, to help another person, you know, kind of let go of resentment because like today, you know, we were discussing uh, one of the other members there, you know, a situation in the home where two of the other adults were kind of ganging up on and browbeating a child in the home.
Mm.
And you know, after his background and his experiences, it's very difficult. It's really uncomfortable for him to observe any kind of bullying.
Yeah.
So he intervened and, you know, got them off of the child, which is good.
Yeah.
But at the same moment, at least one of them turned all of that onto him, you know, and ended up slamming a door in his face, you know, and he ended up in a fit of anger, slightly injuring himself, you know, by his being triggered by getting the door slammed in his face.
Yeah.
And what I talked about to help him kind of, you know, resolve that was, you know, I said, I remember back in the old days, right? And, you know, I didn't have any concept of my own dignity as and humanity as a person, you know. So people around me always felt free, right, to try to take some of my dignity, you know,
Mm-hmm.
if there was any kind of conflict or contention. You know, the one thing that they could always do would be to take some of my dignity, right?
Yeah.
Now, the point is, you know, it was something that I always made available to them by my own, you know, reaction,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they could count on it, right? And you know, the kind of, I guess, um, paradox of it is, of course, you know, once they would do that, they would always be disappointed in me.
Mm.
And the other thing would be that this dignity that they've taken from me, they have no use for,
Yeah.
right? They can't do anything with it, but they would come back again and again to try, you know, to take it, and I would
Yeah.
let them have it. You know, I told my friend, it's like, you know, I live my life in such a way now that, you know, my dignity is no longer available to anyone except me, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't suffer episodes like that on a normal basis, you know, but you know, I can't tell him to live like I do, you know, I can't. I mean, he still has a family, right?
Yeah.
And everyone in this scenario is a family member,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm like, the way out of that kind of resentment is not going to be the same as what I've done.
Yeah.
Earlier in the session, he shed some tears,
Mm.
and when we all witnessed that, I said, I've been kind of interviewing people, men and women, about shedding tears, men shedding tears, grown adult men,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this sort of newly acquired consensus, this newly acquired kind of agreement among people that men shedding tears, men crying, is an expression of courage and dignity. And I said, you just showed us, courage and dignity,
Mm.
right? Because you did that. You know, this is courageous. This is dignified. This is what I hate to say it, but this is a part of what a man ought to be, right?
Mm.
Not for the sake of anybody else, but for this. If you cry, and you show others you crying, this is dignity, right?
Mm.
This is uh, um, that which is respectable, you know. And I'm like, well, it is, but the issue is that when you realize that, it's like, I am doing this because I have the dignity and the courage to overcome all my conditioning and go ahead and cry and show it to you.
Mm.
Now the flip side is, if you do that, then you have to realize the only one that's going to be responsible for that dignity is you.
Yeah.
Now, we all know what, the reality is for men that cry in front of their loved ones, in front of people, right? Now, like I said, even though there's this just kind of recent agreement, that this is a good thing, nobody reacts well to it.
Mm.
Well, almost nobody, but he today managed to do that right in front of a group of people that know how to handle it and know what to do with it,
Mm.
and help him uh be able to do it again, right? But like I said, it's still with that caveat, you know this is, it's like you've unlocked a new capability, right? The trouble is, you got to be careful with it, right? You have to assume that it's not going to be received everywhere the same way it's being received here, you
Mm.
know. But your choices then are stop doing it and re- relinquish your dignity, or
Mm.
go ahead and do it anyway for the sake of your dignity, regardless of how it's reacted to.
Mm.
You know, like I said, it's that same old thing, man. Nothing is free. You know,
Yeah.
nothing comes without nothing comes to us without us having to let go of something else. Now,
Mm-hmm.
in my life, there were a lot of things I let go of that I thought I was just going to die without.
Yeah.
Turns out I was better off without them. You know, but on the other hand, some things we're happy to let go of.
Mm.
I don't know anybody, who sees a real opportunity to let go of resentment that still wants to hold on to it. Our trouble is too often that we only want to let go of our resentments on our own terms, and by satisfying our own uh, I guess, debt, right?
Mm.
And it's like, I have been, the debts owed to me have been repaid so seldom, right, in my life, that I just kind of live assuming that, the debts owed to me are never going to be paid, right?
Mm.
It's a write-off, just like a business at the end of the year. they figure out all the accounts that, that went toes up on them and bailed, and just write it off. A business writes off a loss to the government. When it comes to your spirit, you have to write it off to something else. But like I said, I don't do that with the expectation that, one day I'm just going to be surprised by having somebody that, that is indebted to me that way show up and somehow make my life better.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. So anyway, I wanted to talk about it and kind of, caution our movement and really just men and boys in general, just how caustic and poisonous and dangerous resentment is, regardless of what it, wherever you point it, it's like one of those guns that's got the barrel pointing the wrong direction.
Yeah.
It's like it's always going to blow your head off. So yeah, you go ahead.
I was going to say, well, if you want to see the ultimate consequences of resentment, I would suggest going back to about 1933 onwards, and that's how dangerous resentment can be. You also have to ask who's pushing resentment, and that is people with a vested interest, whether that be the media, politicians, whatever you. And the things that we're obviously most interested in, sort of gender relations and what have you, who has the vested interest in pushing onto women that they should be resentful towards men? Well, that's the feminist movement. That's kind of what they're doing here. And part of the message of the men's rights movement is to say, look, this hatred of men is ridiculous, because it's not 99% of us that are responsible for whatever grievances you may have. So yeah, resentment is a very dangerous thing. I too have had to let go of quite a bit of it in my time, especially over the last few years. I haven't let go of all of it yet, but it's a work in progress. There are times where I feel, or I think, I'm not using that term, where I think my resentment towards individuals is justified because of their actions or because of their words. There are also experiences I've had, even just very, very recently, where those resentments take on a new perspective and you think, well, that's just not worth it anymore. There's nothing like, I suppose, death to realign your priorities, remind you of what really matters in this world. And holding on to resentment and then forcing it down somebody else's throat to the degree I referenced when I said 1933 can cause catastrophic, near world-ending consequences. So yeah, try not to hold on to resentment, folks. It's not a good look.
Right. Well, it's not. And, as we were talking before we started the show, the type of, I guess, person, that will camouflage and, dress up resentment in, other clothes and make it look like, some path to a better tomorrow. Again, 1933, that's kind of what happened,
Yeah.
These really bad actors got together and, like I say, they generated fear and resentment into literally a promise of a better tomorrow. And it went so bad so fast, that while it was going on, there were a lot of people that just thought, wow, this is just going to take us all out. And that was before the Manhattan Project. That was before we invented weapons that could actually take us all out. They just thought this is going to be, a global war of attrition. where it's just going to go on until there's nobody left to fight.
Yeah.
And it's like, then what? But that's the nature of resentment, and I guess, most malignant and immoral tool of the bad actor, because they hitch their wagon to the people's fear and resentment and bitterness, and morph it into a holy conflict, in order to produce a utopia, right? And it's like, we're human beings, man. We've never worked that way.
Yeah.
We never have, and as long as we're just people, we never will.
Yeah.
These are the rules.
Yeah. I think resentment on a person to person level is okay to a certain degree. And I'll explain why. When you got interpersonal relationships that break down, okay, whether that be a physically intimate relationship or friendships, work-based relationships, whatever, if it leads you to, if you resenting the actions of the other party leads you to make a positive change in one way or another, that's fine. But if it leads you down a path of destruction, then that's when resentment is not fine. And it's really bad news. I mean, obviously talking about 1933 onwards, that's a real extreme example of the power of resentment and fear and everything else. And we, as we said, we see it in the circles that we run in the conversations that we have. And I think the big difference here is this isn't the earlier 20th century, where you've got one side being resentful and the other side deciding to fight back with equal levels of violence, or maybe in certain circumstances greater levels of violence. The resentment that is being shown in particular towards men and boys from some women, and women who are adherents to a certain political ideology, has led them down the path of walking away from society in general.
Right.
Which, yes, it's not a good thing in one sense, but at least these men and boys have chosen the least violent option in reacting to the resentment that they receive for no other reason than being born male. They decided, no, I'm walking away. I'm cashing in my chips, and I don't want to know. And we as men's advocates, men's activists, we're turning around and saying we're not going to do that, but we can certainly understand why some would say that.
Right.
And we've got to be careful that we don't start throwing that resentment back with equal or greater force, because everybody loses at that stage. Right. There is no winner.
Right. It just escalates, as like I said, into a conflict of attrition.
Yeah.
It gets to a place where everybody's into it so deep that they're going to keep doing it until they get taken out of the game completely.
Yeah. If we want to use the World War II analogy, you've gone from, say, the early part of the Second World War and London being bombed by maybe a couple of hundred aircraft a night for 70 something nights it was, to the 1,000 bomber raids over Dresden. That's what happens when the resentment is returned with greater force.
Right. And the U.S. Pacific Fleet, being surprise attacked and sunk, resulting in 2 cities being rendered uninhabitable. I mean, they get erased.
Yeah.
They're gone. But yeah, I mean, this is um, that's the outcome. When I say outcome, not necessarily even punishment, but the inevitable result of operating with resentment
Hmm.
is, it will take one really despicable act and, generate another one that's at least a little more despicable.
Yeah.
And, it's like, well, you can do that, but if you don't make it a pretty final stroke, um, what do you think is going to happen? You
Yeah.
know, there's no, there's no willing end to it as long as everybody is only, resentful and afraid.
Mm.
These are, it's like, it sounds really pretty and, morally satisfied to say all this, but, the reality of it is, it's grim, right?
Mm.
It's grim realization that, wow, every time I have a resentful impulse, what I'm doing is I'm sitting back down to that table again. I'm putting my chips on this really crooked game, right?
Yeah.
And I'm doing it because it's like I'm doing it because I want to. I'm doing it because I feel, justified and compelled to do it. And I'm like, that's really hard to give up. I say it's like holding on to the other side of it, which is dignity.
Yeah.
People talk about dignity like it's this, this real high flown moral virtue that isn't really part of everyday life.
Yeah.
I was pointing out to my friend, I said, your dignity, sometimes it's very hard to put much value on it, but when that door is getting slammed in your face while you're being screamed at,
Mm.
if you can, if you can hold on to your dignity, then you don't slam your fist into the door and fracture your knuckle.
Yeah.
But if you let go of your dignity, this is what happens.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a bitter choice. I mean, I never talk about things like that in terms of, oh, well, golly, just, uh, uh, hold on to your dignity and everything will be okay.
Yeah.
It's like, no, no, it won't. It just won't be quite as bad as when you don't hold on to it.
Yeah.
you know Either way, it's not free and it's not painless.
Mm.
um and either, really, the other thing about it, going back to what we talk about and what we don't talk about, either one of those is frightening,
Yeah.
scary. Letting go of your dignity and having a tantrum and uh I guess, like, giving in to your impulses. It's scary to talk about that.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out a way not to give in to that impulse and, all of a sudden put a high value, on your dignity and humanity. That terrifies people. It's like,
Mm.
how do you even do that? You
Yeah.
know, how do you, when somebody that is clearly in the wrong, is throwing a fit and being unreasonable and hostile and aggressive toward you, how do you all of a sudden just pull back and say, you know, I have been really working on putting a high value on my personhood and my dignity. This is the time to exercise it.
Mm.
It ain't that easy. It really isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. It's one of those ones I'm stuck for things to say on, really. Because I'm as guilty of being short fused as anybody else out there, to be honest with you. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I mean, I definitely don't do it perfect, and
Mm.
I don't do it as consistently as I would like.
Yeah.
Really the main difference between right now and back then is, the hangover that I feel after I lose my dignity,
Mm.
and I give in to my resentments. Now I know where that hangover comes from.
Yeah.
You know, I know I just squandered a little more of what makes me, you know, a good fella,
Mm.
right? And like the good news is, it's a renewable resource.
Mm.
The downside is that, like most renewable resources, it takes work to get more, you
Yeah.
know. Then I have to do something, uh I have to help somebody, right?
Yeah.
I have to be kind, right? I have to be forgiving. I have to be patient. You know,
Mm.
uh, I've been at this for these years now, 8 years. Just
Mm-hmm.
had my anniversary last week. And all this time, and I'm like, this is still work, right?
Mm.
This is still some stuff I got to do.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, I'm lazy. At the end of the day, I don't like work. Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but we all know what happens when I don't recover, that part of my soul.
Mm.
You know, as I this is the kind of person I am you know, uh, when I get, some momentary satisfaction
Mm.
out of giving up a little of my humanity. What I do is give up a little more of my humanity.
Yeah.
And the next thing I know, I don't have any left.
Yeah.
It's a maintenance thing, upkeep,
Yeah.
right? Mhm.
Yeah. I've just seen a quick 5-second clip of Erin Pitsey talking about women have turned their backs on men, and I think
Mhm.
that's something that the feminists really wanted, and they've really pushed hard for. And it's it's a similar thing to ordinary people during the Second World War years turning their back on their humanity, or at least the politicians turning their back on their humanity and allowing the war to get as bad as it did
Mhm.
and the loss of life to just ever increase. Um, Although I will say that the Second World War was the last justifiable war we ever had. Yeah,
Right. In the context of justifiable war, yeah.
yeah. Well, it was the only one that was. Well, it's the last one which had a sense of morality to it.
Right. Yeah, and also had a component of, preventing the end of civilization.
Hmm.
There was a moral end of it, but there was also a practical end of it.
Yeah.
It just wasn't, I said it wasn't going to work.
No.
It was just a bad idea.
Yeah.
Um, like, going back to the resentment thing, well, like feminists, you know,
Mhm.
like I said, uh when you take the dressing and camouflage off, feminism, among other movements, are really politicizing resentment,
Yeah.
and vengeance,
Yes.
retribution.
Yeah.
And it's, again, put the morals and ethics aside for a second, and, will this work, right? Is it achievable, and is it sustainable? you know and when I speak with at least some feminists that, you know uh where they can talk about things like this, they will tell me, I don't want to be resentful, and I
Mm.
don't want to be vengeful and retributive. I just want the things that are in the dictionary definition. I said, and I always say, I say it to our people too. Nothing comes for free,
Yeah.
right? If you want that thing that you read in the Webster's, then you're not, it will always be out of reach, right? As
Mm.
long as the as long as the main drive of that same thing is not what they're putting in the dictionary, you
Yeah.
know. And that's, again, morals and ethics aside, right? Some things work and some things don't,
Yeah.
right? But don't ever forget that most of the people, keeping the work of the movement away from real equality and equanimity and toward resentment and retribution, okay, they have a reason to keep doing that,
Yeah. Because
right?
it pays well.
Right. It pays well, and it provides access to influence
Yeah.
and control that they otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah.
You know?
It's
And again, same thing on our side of it. The lion's share of the rank and file, want nothing to do with, um, well, what everybody else calls toxic masculinity and patriarchy, just imbalance,
mm,
just a clumsy and short-sighted imbalance in society. We
mm,
don't want that. The reason we don't want that is we've experienced it. It doesn't work, and it makes everybody miserable.
mm.
I mean, we have good practical reasons for not wanting it. We're not, like moral paragons. We're just not stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some things work and some things don't. But when
I
I,
thought,
have that kind of conversation,
yeah.
then some of what I'll get back is, well, I never really looked at it that way before. I said, well, because
Mm,
you haven't been allowed to,
yeah.
so this has been the lie of omission.
Mm,
It's not anybody, who tells you like the sky is medium purple is lying to you, but that's a lie of commission. They just told you the sky is purple. You look up and say, no, it's blue. you
mm,
know that's not hard to deal with.
yeah.
But if somebody tints your eyeballs in such a way that the sky suddenly starts looking purple, right?
Mm,
But never tells you that's what they've done, how do you know?
yeah.
You know, you see what I mean? It's like there's a lot of different ways to lie, and most of them have to do with not saying anything.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's what's happening, and I think that's what is sort of uh drying up the blind and unquestioning, fealty and loyalty to their movement. It is just the fact that too many of them are saying, you're not telling me everything I need to know, and you keep repeating a bunch of things that I'm pretty sure are not true. And what I am only here because I want things to even out and get corrected, right? Which is a noble goal, right? If that's what they were doing, I'd be right there with them.
Yeah.
you know and I wouldn't worry about it because I don't have a reason to, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, the same people will ask me, why aren't you one of us? Why? And I'm like, well, because your movement goes places where I can't follow. And
Yeah.
when I say that, what I mean is I can't be a resentful person and expect to live long. You
Yeah.
know, and more importantly, I can't be a resentful person in your movement and have you not be sorry you ever met me.
Mm,
Because when I get that way, before I tear myself apart, I crap all over everybody else.
yeah.
You know, that's the rules. Nothing I can do about it. You know,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, this is my justification for not joining.
Mm,
I'm doing you a favor. Trust me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm, See, I don't think I might be wrong here. I don't think there is as much resentment on this side of the fence, if I'm honest. I think it's getting there slowly,
Yeah.
and I try to temper against it. And there's a difference between pointing out that there are people who are causing part of that are responsible for some of this,
Mm.
and I wish this is something the feminists understood. The things that are happening now, you have to take responsibility for within your movement.
Mm.
Your resentment's gotten out of control. Congratulations, you've just marched 6 million people to the gas chambers. I hope you're happy with yourselves.
Right. Yeah, it's
That's where we are.
um,
And there have been so many feminists who have turned around and said things that I've never, in the years that I've been involved with the men's movement, heard any men's activists say. I've heard stuff be said, shall we say, not joking, but definitely not serious. And I'm sure you're aware of some of those things. So some of
yeah.
the comments Paul Elam has made in the past on his blogs and websites
Mm.
and what have you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing, as far as the degree of it,
Mm,
we're just getting started, right?
yeah.
So we haven't had time to develop a grand tradition, of dunking on, the adversary, I guess.
Mm,
Whereas they have, you
yeah.
know, where it becomes again, it's one of those things. The problem is it just becomes part of the wallpaper, you
Yeah.
know. And by the time, like us, and this is our fault, by
Mm,
the time we woke up and said, this is really bad wallpaper,
yeah.
everybody was living with it. And they're like, what do you mean? There's nothing wrong with this wallpaper. It's the
Yeah.
wallpaper we've always had,
Yeah.
you know. Um, it's funny, in Victorian homes in the United Kingdom specifically, I understand there was a problem with wallpaper because it was the adhesive being used to stick it to the wall apparently was poisonous, and the
Wouldn't
poison would
surprise me.
leach out, yeah, would leach out into the air in the home and make people sick. And
Yeah,
I was
that
like,
wouldn't surprise me.
you know, but for the wallpaper allegory, it's like, we've wrapped our culture and our communities and all that stuff, like I said, in this wallpaper, in this backdrop, that is becoming unlivable, right?
Yeah.
For everybody, for I mean, like in our movement, the women who are MRAs, it generally speaking, they're MRAs and they're active, because they have found current day life, like just too much, too bad, too uh offensive and um uh degrading,
Mm,
you know, and they don't like it, of course, who would?
mm,
Um, and they all have you've heard them all, even the younger ones, like the tall lady, there's this sense of regret that they didn't wake up sooner.
mm.
And my thing to tell them is, um, you're a woman and I'm a man, but I regret that I didn't wake up sooner. Right. So, I share that feeling with you
Yeah.
because I mean, maybe you didn't, maybe you should have. I know for a fact that I didn't and I should have.
Yeah.
You So yeah, I mean, it's like I said, our lack of depth in being messed up and mishandling it,
Mm,
we haven't got there yet.
Mm.
but we're catching up quickly, right?
Yeah.
And said it all stems from bitterness. It all that uh, uh, potential failure. It stems from our own bitterness
Yeah.
and our own fear of uh, having to be responsible for, what we're asking for,
Mm.
what we're demanding. And it's fearful. I mean, I don't blame anybody for, kind of shying away from that. I don't. But
Mm.
the choices are, either strive for what to be right and just, and
Mm.
then deal with those consequences, or leave everything the way it is and just let it all burn to the ground.
Yeah.
Because those are the only two choices left. It
Yeah.
sucks. I hate it. I feel bad about it, whatever, but there's no door number three. I know, I've looked. It's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. Another thing that's been sort of said about the whole um, gender thing is, well, this is a war in which only one side turned up, and
Mhm.
that is something that we're only really now coming to terms with, unfortunately.
Right, right. And a lot of the time, the ones of us that are showing up, they're the most frustrating part of our movement to me is that we keep showing up on the wrong battlefield.
Mm.
you know? And I'm like, don't do that. If
Yeah.
there's like a real contention to be had, you're going to have to go where it is. you know
Mm.
and it's, I understand them not wanting to, right?
Yeah.
I know I don't want to, right? But sometimes you have to.
Mm.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, like, at Thermopylae, right? It's just like those people, those guys, they didn't want to go there, and they didn't want to
Mm.
do what they had to do, but it was that, or let uh the savage horde just take over all of Greece. Um, but most of the time, well, not most of the time, some of the time, progress can be made, without contention,
Mm.
right? Without having to, you know, like turn the whole thing into a bar fight.
Mm.
But those that kind of progress, right? And that kind of oh resolution, you know, it's not seductive, right? It's not appealing, and it's not quick, right? And it's also not easy to maintain. You know, if you negotiate a real and mutual agreement, right? So now you have an agreement,
Mm.
and you're gonna change things, and you're gonna stop doing what you were doing, and you're gonna
Mm.
start doing what you weren't doing, and same thing on the other side. Well, the next thing you know, everybody has to agree to keep doing those things, and not let it uh just fall apart.
Yeah.
It's like I tell people, it's like, human beings, it's absolutely astonishing, what we can put up with, and what we can endure, and what we can do for a short period of time,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we're amazing. Okay. um the issue is, what happens after that short period of time, because
Yeah.
now you've got a precedent. Now you've got something to point back to and say, see, we did it before. you
Yeah.
know and why can't we do it again?
Mm.
And it's like, then it becomes sort of a spiral. Then you just keep doing it for a little while, and then it fails, and you pick yourself up and you start doing it again, and you do it for a while and then you fail.
Mm.
It becomes very frustrating. And the same thing with uh resolving and renegotiating the relationships among people in general, but also specifically between men and women. It's going to have all those characteristics. It's
Yeah.
going to be it's going to be difficult. It's going to require sacrifice. It's going to require mutual struggle, right?
Mm.
And most important of all, into the foreseeable future, it's going to require maintenance.
Mm.
It's not that we're both sides are going to have to be doing it. It's that both sides are going to have to keep doing it.
Yeah.
You know, like for a long time.
Mm.
It took us a long time to kind of settle on an uneasy but workable um uh relationship between men and women. Now,
Mm.
looking back on it, we cluck our tongues and shake our heads and say, what the heck were they thinking?
Mm.
Why would, but that was the best they could do, because these people were in survival mode. It was like
Yeah.
the question was, you know, how do we exist and coexist long enough to produce and raise offspring?
Mm.
And really, that was it, you know, and keep the gene pool, diverse, right? So that there's enough that we don't start inbreeding.
Mm.
All that sounds horrible, but that was the way it was.
Yeah.
So they came up with this kind of like half-ass patriarchy, mixed with matriarchy, mixed with um, you know, uh, uh, I don't know what you would call it exactly, whatever preceded um, governance,
Mm.
tribalism, I suppose.
Yeah.
So like for thousands of years, it's like, here you go, here's the solution. You can do this for long enough to produce and nurture offspring for long enough so that they can go out and produce and nurture offspring, and then you can die. you know
Mm.
Mission accomplished, you can just jump off a cliff.
Yeah.
But we don't live that way anymore. We haven't lived that way probably for a millennium.
Mm.
you know so finally we're all saying, we got to do better than this. I mean, this is not whatever the hell this is, it's not an answer. you know
Yeah.
and it was a pipe dream to try to like uh uh drop things like mercantilism and capitalism and uh monarchy, and eventually democracy on top of it, and
Mm.
expect it to just keep going.
Mm.
Something's got to give. But
Yeah.
we uh, we were successful enough to progress ourselves, you know, uh, out of equilibrium.
Mm.
Right? We're like lemmings, man. It's just like overpopulation, and we start jumping off cliffs.
I'm not
Like,
giving you any ideas.
really, I mean, that's the uh, grim reality. you
Mm.
know, is that none of us are doing today, you know, just what we invented among ourselves in our own lifetime. You know,
Mm.
e- Everything that we're doing, and everything we're having trouble with, is a reaction to, and a resistance to let go of everything that came before us.
Mm.
Now, again, people don't like to talk about that because it's kind of humbling.
Mm.
It's humbling for me to realize that a lot of, even my willingness to stick around, it comes from the fact that, a lot of things happened before I showed up.
Mm.
Right? And presumably at least a few things are going to happen after I'm gone.
Yep.
You know, and it's humbling to realize that, especially for somebody like me, right? You know, I have a tenuous place in all that,
Yeah.
right? You know, I mean, I was thinking uh earlier today, like, you know, I had to, you know, really resolve and come to grips with my resentments and my bitterness, et cetera, et cetera. I
Mm.
said, but one thing, you know, that I am going to have to live with, right? And that I will die with is the fact that my direct family name is going to die with me.
Mm.
My brothers have families, but they're daughters. None of
Yeah.
them, neither one of them had any sons, you know. So my family name uh, isn't going to, you know, won't be around after we're gone.
Mm.
Um, that is a really permanent consequence of, you know, something that, like, I originally, uh, I guess, kind of renounced out of
Mm.
resentment and bitterness. And now
Yeah.
it's really kind of too late to do anything about it. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I could, you know, I could go through a bunch of expensive surgery and, you know, go through a bunch of expensive and difficult self-improvement and, you know, get my butt back out there and find me a wifey, you know, to have a son with. But I will assure you all right now, I'm not going to do that.
You're playing long odds there as well, because
Very long, very long.
the odds that you will find someone and be able to produce a son
Mm,
fairly quick succession
right.
is somewhere between slim and none at all. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Plus
know,
you know, I mean, there's a few like surgical options to de-sterilize myself. But I'm, like I said, I'm not going to do that, you know.
yeah,
Um, and you know, I think I can make the case for why I'm not going to do that, you know. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, the reason behind why I did it, you know, was a combination of despair and bitterness, you know. And it's like, you know, that maybe I did the right thing, but I don't think I did it for the right reason. And now
yeah,
I got to just kind of deal with it, you know, and make some use of it, which I
yeah,
do. You know, as you know, I talk about it frequently, but
mm,
I have to remind people that, yeah, I did it, you know,
mm,
and maybe by accident I did the right thing, you know, but I know at the time, you know, I wasn't doing it for the right reason,
yeah,
you know. Like I said, it's, you know, it's
yeah,
it's not as simple and cut and dried as people think it is. You know,
mm,
it's messy as hell, and there's so little of it that is fun or easy to talk about.
mm,
So, you know, like I said, the alternative is to just go find an in-group, you know, that's resentful and bitter and looking for, you know, payback, right?
yeah,
Because that's seductive, that's attractive, and it's easy and simple, especially now, you know. But like I said, you know, the consequences of that route are permanent,
mm,
you know, they're they're unrecoverable.
yeah,
You know, once you go there, you don't get to come back, right? But this, you know, this way of going at it, you can correct your course, you can, uh, you know, make amends, right? You
mm,
can repair damage, and you can be encouraging, you know, and honorable and loyal, without being tribal and
mm,
without being prejudiced or biased.
mm,
It's just that it's harder. and
Yeah.
it's not as much fun.
Mm,
Um, and it isn't as immediately gratifying. It's just
mm,
that the only thing that makes it appealing is that it works,
yeah.
you know.
See, with the things you're just saying in about not being tribal or biased and everything else,
Mhm.
that's part of the reason. The idea in feminism of the sisterhood is a bit of a joke
Mhm.
because it relies on the idea that in order for that to really work, you have to believe that women are capable of no wrong.
Right,
They
right,
don't. They don't have that ability,
right.
which any men's activist will tell you is a complete nonsense. And in order for a brotherhood of the same ilk to work, we would have to believe that men are capable of no wrong,
Yeah,
which
right.
is again an absolute nonsense.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
We earlier we were talking about our cohort, the Better Bachelor.
mm,
And I'll start out by saying I think in general, he's a good fella, right? And his approach to things in general, I think, is practical and thoughtful, but at the same time, the things that he avoids um confronting, and the things that he doesn't seem to be comfortable talking about are probably the things that he ought to spend the most amount of time talking about, because that would give
mhm,
all the weight in the world to the things that he talks about now,
yeah,
because no one would be able to accuse him of being unreasoningly prejudiced and biased out of his own resentment and bitterness.
mm,
But
yeah,
as it is now, he's vulnerable to that,
yeah.
right?
I,
um
I think he's one of the few in the whole sphere, the whole manosphere thing, if you want to call it that,
mhm.
who I don't think is guided by bitterness and resentment. I don't know. I don't know his full background story, so I couldn't say that with absolute certainty. But I think he's one of the ones who's just decided that the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't ever get the feeling that he's hurting,
Mm,
or that he's kind of uh uh expressing his wounds,
mm,
of anything.
mm,
But again, it's there's something preventing him, from also saying, look, you know, in in my own personal life, or what I've seen around me
mm,
shows me that not everyone in the the uh demographic that I'm talking about is the same as every other, you
mm,
know and here it's like, here are notable examples that we should all be pointing to. In this case, obviously it's women. Here are women, that are actually pulling this rabbit out of a hat.
mm.
Okay. Just and it's like, you other women that I've been talking about so much, just do what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's it. That's all you got to do.
Mm,
Right. Which is, to be frank, it's not that much. Again, I 2 hours today in the morning, it was 5 guys, myself and 4 others, and a young woman who was the facilitator,
mm,
and she pulls that rabbit out of the hat every time we meet, and she
mm.
makes it look easy, you
Yeah.
know, and when I have more contentious conversations with women, which not doesn't really happen very much, but when it does, I'm like, just do that. It don't complicate this, right?
Mm,
She does it all the time, and whenever she does, the other thing about it is, when she does that, right? She tells us, she goes out of her way to tell us how grateful she is that we give her the opportunity to support us and help us heal. It seems to make her very happy, right? And the same thing with my other therapist. All of my therapists now are women. They all do the same damn thing, and they all tell me the same thing. They'll tell me that, how much they appreciate me and mine, that we are allowing them, to save us from horrible death.
Yeah,
Like,
I
dude,
I
you're
think
welcome.
yeah, I think that's a red-pilled woman, a truly
Yeah,
red-pilled woman, because
yeah,
she
it is.
because well, they understand the position that they find themselves in, and they understand how to make that work.
I guess, but and you just hit something that has occurred to me more than once.
Mm,
Both the, the like bogus red pill men and people in general who seem to believe that they're red pilled, they treat all that as if it's some kind of uh, arcane, mysterious logos forbidden knowledge.
mm,
It's really not.
no.
I tell them it's like, with my one friend who's not a therapist at all, she's just a person. I say,
Mm,
you don't understand how rare you are, and uh how grateful I am that I know you.
mm,
And I say the reason is because you do this, for me and for the other men in your life.
mm,
And, her response to that is, well, what else am I going to do? It's, like it's obvious. And I'm like, it really is.
mm,
There's no secret here. This is not, it really is not pulling a rabbit out of a hat.
mm,
It's just being decent, mature, understanding, empathetic, and like clear-headed. Or really, that's all it is.
mm.
I mean, the red pill community, what, I don't know whatever they are, you know. Um, honestly, I mean, they really do treat it like it's, uh, um, nuanced and mysterious knowledge, and wisdom that's being kept from most people. Like, that's just not true.
I'm not so sure. I'm not sure. I'm with you completely there
Well, make me a
because
case, convince me.
well, we only have to look at the conversation. Red and blue pilled. The blue
Yeah,
the
no,
blue pill side is what it used to be. The people that were unconscious of these things and the issues that men and boys have. I used to be blue pill as all hell once upon a time. And we get the thing of red pill rage. And it's because the red pill rage is basically there because people become aware of the issues and the situation of society and everything else, and they cannot believe that it was either a kept from them or that they were blind to it, and it makes them extremely angry once they see the injustices facing men and boys and are prepared to acknowledge that those injustices exist and that they are wrong. It makes them angry. It
yeah,
makes incredibly angry. So to that degree, red pill knowledge, if you want to call it that, is somewhat hidden. The
yeah. No,
the
I get what you're saying. The I guess, humiliation and resentment
Mhm,
that is red pill rage.
mhm,
um it's both of those things. It's discovering what you've been led away from, right? But also the humiliation of realizing that even though you're being led away from it, it's kind of been in front of your face the whole time.
yeah,
Because that is humiliating. Anybody who says otherwise is lying to themselves.
mhm,
Eventually it's humbling, but in
mhm,
the beginning, there's a great sense of shame around saying, wow, what I have been such an idiot, you know. And then you kind of get over that and you realize that, you know, everybody else has been just as blind. Then it's
Hmm.
like, okay, well, it's not shameful, but you know, I got to remember that I can also be that blind.
Hmm.
Um, so for that part of it, yes, you know, that maybe is pulling a rabbit out of a hat, or uh, you know, enduring enough suffering over a long enough time that you're forced to wake up. You
Yeah.
know, you're like
And
you're forced out of the tube, so to speak.
yeah, and
Um,
that's why I say, you're talking about, red pillars act as if red pill knowledge is kind of secretive and or what have you, and it kind of is. There is kind of, you know, there's almost a smugness to being red pilled, isn't there?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like you beat the game, and you're right. You know, it is true that at least the the secretive part of it has
Mm,
always been there.
mm,
You know, so yeah, that's true.
yeah.
But like the complexity and you know, kind of detail that you find in things like books like The Rational Male,
Mm,
or The Game, you know,
mm,
or the various and sundry, you know, product of people like Pearly and Sneeko and Fresh and Fit. And I guess Myron Gaines actually self-published a book, you know, on Amazon. And I'm like, you know, I've exposed myself to that stuff, right? I've read
mm,
it, you know, and I'm like, none of this is nearly as complicated as you're making it. You know, it really isn't. I mean, the Rollo Tomasi's book, The Rational Male, is kind of big, you know,
mm,
and I can tell that it took him a long time to write it, you know.
mm,
Um, and you know, it's one of those things, it's not even wrong. It's just so overburdened and I don't know how you'd put it exactly, maybe um overwrought with detail, you know, that kind of repeats itself and references itself to the point where it's like, Rollo, just tell us that, you know, that men and women are not quite the same. That's all you got to say, you know. And that,
yeah.
you know, even within that, you know, there are a lot of exceptions and caveats that are both kind of innate and natural, and also that we've, you know, worked ourselves into, right? But instead, I mean, this is like 500-page book, and I'm like, you know, dude, you know, just drink a glass of water, right? You know, calm down. You don't need to do all this. But of course, he does need to do all that because that's where the money is,
Yeah.
you know.
But he's making a mountain out of a molehill.
Right, right. And again, you know, it's not a matter of him being, you know, factually inaccurate or
Mm,
anything like that, you know, or even maybe morally repugnant. He's kind of more like more morally neutral. And I, you know, it would be great if humans could function without morals. It's just that we can't.
mm,
You know, we're not that good, right? But we have to have them. I don't like them. I'd rather figure out a way to function well without them, but can't do it. You know,
mm,
can't do it. I want to run a mile in a minute. I can't do that either. You know, you know, I want to fly under my own power. I can't do that either.
mm.
So, but anyway, I don't know. I guess I've kind of talked it out. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I suppose the only final thought I can really come up with takes me back to my original point. and that is if you allow the resentment to fester too long, it will lead you down a very, very dark path to the degree that we saw in the earlier 20th century.
Right.
And I don't think we're there at the moment. I don't think we're anywhere near that. But things are bad. Things are only going to get worse. And it scares me to the degree as to how bad it's actually going to get. And maybe this is a conversation we can do another night. The transgender debate is only making things worse, and it's only is complicating matters, and is leading to ever greater levels of resentment. And somebody needs to put the cork in the bottle and fast. I just don't know who's the right person to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. You're right. We're it's one of those things, it's like we're in a tunnel right now. There's not very much light, but we see the light ahead, and we have identified that it is not sunlight, but rather an oncoming train. And now we're looking behind us, trying to figure out if we can run fast enough to get the hell out of the tunnel before the train comes. But it's as you say, it is something that will probably get significantly worse for everyone before it honestly gets better. Better meaning, sustainably better that we can keep doing. And that, what I tell people that are worried about it, regardless of which campfire they sit around, that, it's honorable and probably necessary to go into it wanting to make things better and at least minimize the damage. That's the right thing to do, but you should go into it already being convinced that it will for sure get worse before it gets better. There is no stopping that now. And also go into it understanding that the chances of it getting very much better before the end of your life are very slim. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying that, it's not likely at all. That whatever it is you're fighting for, whatever it is, that you're doing, understand that you're doing it mostly for people that are going to come after you. You're probably never going to meet.
Yeah.
But it's still, it makes it the right thing to do. It's just about which reasons you're doing it for. If you're doing it for yourself, don't bother.
Yeah.
That's me. I mean, that's what keeps me, that's what keeps me in the game. Because I don't feel like I have to do any of this much for myself,
Yeah.
And I know pretty sure that things are not going to get better while I'm still here, but I don't feel like they have to. That's it's at this point it's unreasonable for me to expect them to get better in time for me. That's not, doesn't make sense. It's like if it's the kind of thing where where things suddenly start getting a whole lot better for me and anyone like me, something has gone wrong, and that things are going to be bad for everybody else. So I don't want that.
I think our job is we can't use your freight train and the tunnel analogy. We can't stop the freight train,
Right.
But what we can do is stop people from running towards it.
Right.
And hope that they get out before the freight train hits.
Right. And that's good enough. I mean, that's it's a worthy goal, and it's a good reason to push on, and all those really, nice sounding things. But like I said, just for me personally, because of the way I live and, my circumstances, it's also, it's good to know that, before it was too late, I rejected resentment and bitterness and fear and vengeance. That old story about the angel of justice, was sent to earth to look over and look out for humanity and make sure things were just. But he was, deceived and tricked by an imp of the fallen one and dragged down into hell. And then he was sent back to earth again. But instead of being the angel of justice, he became the spirit of vengeance. Because those are two sides of the same condition.
Yeah.
And like I say, it's good to know, before it was too late, I preferred the angel of justice.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, all right. Well, thank you, DeadDuck. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope we didn't get too high flown for you all. And we will see you again next time.
Cheerio.
Take care. Cheers.